I will say my discipline has not. This is the age of psychology and psychotherapy, and we're certainly not showing that we figured out at a societal level how to create a healthier society. In fact, we're participating in a society to watch the decline. And so, at folks that are psychologists, psychotherapists, as we've gotten more power, we have demonstrated a worsening of mental health. So societally, my system doesn't know what it's doing. I used to bitch about psychiatry and the way it would medicate neurotic problems with SSRIs and other things, but I look at my field down. I'm like, yeah, actually, I don't think we know what we're doing at a societal level in terms of helping this. In fact, I have lots of critiques about it. We can get into that. But anyway, it's tragic. We can do better. Lots of reasons why we're not doing very well at a societal level, and Utah has a lot to say about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is truly tragic. And recently I had the good fortune of having Stephen Hayes, founder of ACT, on.
Oh, really?
And it was fascinating to hear his take on this, because he definitely says, like, as a profession, psychotherapy and psychiatry has just not done its job. It was meant to alleviate all of this suffering. And if we just look at the numbers, it's just getting worse and worse, even though evidence-based psychotherapy is getting better and better, supposedly, in the science. But in terms of how we're helping people, the global scale is just, yeah.
Right. So, and I share a lot. In fact, Utah gives rise to what's called COMMO as one of its core components, and that's an integrated approach to psychological mindfulness. It overlaps directly with ACT, acceptance commitment therapy. That's what he found. So I have a huge amount of respect for him. However, as we just produced an article, my partner and I, Masia, just produced an article called The Common Core, of psychotherapy. It delineates the unified approach and specifies what the Common Core is in a way that actually raises questions about how we should be thinking about evidence-based practice. I get into the details of this, but fundamentally, we actually need we can't reduce these things to the alphabet soup of CBT, ACT, EFT, etc. And Steve is supporting of this with his process-based stuff. But the question is, how do we actually get process-based stuff into a society that doesn't cloister the language of mental health in a professional relationship and medicalize it or formalize it in a particular way that is actually alien? And that's actually what tends to happen. And then it's fragmented in that it doesn't embed itself. You say, oh, we need a better account of the human mind. Actually, we don't know what that even means. It's like saying we need a better account of God. Well, do you even know what you're talking about when you use that reference? And we're supposed to be scientists? And my whole point is actually, no, folks, that we psychologists don't know what you mean when you use the word human mind. We don't know. We don't have a framework for understanding that concept. Very different than chemists and atoms. Chemists know what atoms are, okay, folks? We psychologists don't know what the human mind is and don't have a framework for it. So we're out here telling you what things are and giving you little interventions for it. But we're fucking around with something we don't even understand ourselves. Good luck then trying to give that into a system that's already chaotic and adding little parts of knowledge to a system that's already broken. Utah says, part of our problem is exactly that. We've fragmented and then we add fragmented bits. And while they have utility in their local space, there's a whole much bigger mental health crisis, meta-psychology problem that actually not being addressed. And you're really vulnerable to adding chaos to the system if you don't have a big picture. I think that's what we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually very much the core of what I would love to talk to you about is, how can we really scale everything we know about what actually works, what actually alleviates human suffering and promotes well-being? How can we get that to everyone in the culture, basically? I mean, it seems to me very clear as an outsider, how is it possible that a one-on-one psychotherapy model where someone has to go through more than a decade of professional training before they get this knowledge, and then it's only in that one-on-one relationship that it gets shared? How could that possibly reach everyone who's suffering? I don't see how it could possibly work. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on
I mean, it can't. It doesn't, it can't. I mean, you can start, I'll grab this real fast. You can start with psychoanalysis. Okay, psychoanalysis, as it starts into the depths of it, and then generates a treatment model for five, folks. I don't know if you know Freudian original classic drive-based psychoanalysis, 5 years, 5 times a week. That's what 5 for 5 means. So that
Really?
a full course caseload of a psychoanalyst would be 5 patients. So that's the original. Okay, so the Steve Hayes of the world can tell the psychoanalyst dude, you guys are not delivering, okay, at the level of scale that you're going to need to. You're going to create this problem, and then you're not going to. And so then we scale it back, but you still end up with the same effing problem, which is like, we're going to put this in the context of cloistered, one-on-one, trained interventions, as though the struggles of depression, anxiety, loneliness, low self-esteem, relational disconnect, and existential crises, as if that's a one-on-one problem. It's not a one-on-one problem. Look at the mental health crisis. It's a societal cultural problem as every bit as much as a psychological problem. And ultimately, it's even a biological problem in the sense of how do we relate to nature. So there's a macroscopic scale here, that a narrow view that leads to a particular kind of intervention may be very, very problematic. In fact, if you look at what Jonathan Haidt's work suggests, there's a breakdown in community, and then there's a breakdown of play-based childhood, part of which arises from what's called safetyism. Okay? Safetyism is the idea that, oh my God, we can see how emotional injuries are repressed in children, and we can see that it's a very dangerous world. So what we need to do is create the perfect environment to hold emotional injury, help people see the way they've been injured, and then mother them in a completely protective environment so that they're not actually injured by the unfair world that they live in. Oh my God, it turns out you try to do that at a societal level, and we see this with the extreme intense left, what I call woke 2.0, where we're going to try to protect everybody from any kind of injury and examine micro-injuries and microaggressions, of course. And while that's well-intentioned, when you actually multiply it, all you need to do is take a societal lens. Everybody now is a victim, and everybody needs a healer and a pillow space to manage their own, and everybody needs to be trauma-informed. Listen, folks, you're handing people microphones for their injury without recognizing what actually is. Look at all the wisdom traditions. What wisdom tradition orients us to focus on microaggressions and ruminate about the injury that they caused us over the years? I mean, Buddhism, is that what Buddhism fundamentally? You know a little bit about Buddhism, don't you? Yeah. It's like, does it tell you to say, oh my God, feel sorry for yourself and the way in which the world's injured you, and then advertise that to a professional and pay them so that they give you support? That's not exactly what Buddhism says about the self, is it? Okay. In fact, Buddhism essentially says the opposite.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, in essence, it's like your little subjective grievances, right? Your subjective grievances are the road to resistance and pain. Okay, that you cling to and try to create a grievance around. That's actually virtually all the wisdom traditions. Stoicism, all the wisdom traditions are actually be very careful. Now, listen. I'm a leftist at the level of, oh my God, there's a lot of injustices, there's a lot of racial injustices and gendered injustices, and that's systemic issues. But you focus at the individual level on what the systemic issues are, you've misguided the structure. At the individual level, you got to cultivate responsibility, robustness, resiliency, don't bitch about shit. Systemically change structure. We have no conception about how to really, what's a societal level of analysis and the kinds of things we need to be doing versus a psychological level. Why? Because we don't even know what psychology is. So people are completely confused. Not surprisingly, people are completely confused about what it is. So you talk fundamentally is a philosophy ultimately about living wisely, living adaptively, orienting toward wisdom. And it's certainly actually quite critical of exactly the point you make, because like the institutionalization of mental health is a very dangerous thing unless it's really clearly specified about what aspects. Certainly we want to institutionalize the management of things like schizophrenia, okay? But to institutionalize neuroticism and its treatment is a very, very dangerous thing. And that's what we've done. We've institutionalized neuroticism. We need a societal, sociocultural structure to understand what neuroticism is. And we need a societal structure to mitigate it that creates a culture, not just in the cloistered psychotherapy room, but in our classrooms, in our families, in our schools, in our communities. We need to understand what this is. We need to be clear about it, and everyone should have shared understanding. And actually, I think our mental health systems have given a flood of information, but actually very little coherent understanding, ultimately, to sort through what the hell we've learned. And it actually is quite a bit. And it's very helpful potentially, but we don't know how to give that in a way that would cause a society. I think Utah can do this, but the field as a whole has failed to do this.